Hello, everyone. Through our topic for today, we discuss the different factors that affect a sociological research. Now, there are a lot of factors that affect a sociological research. However, we'd confine our discussion towards three of them. To name them, initially, we'd speak about practical factors that affect a research process. Number two, we'd speak about theoretical factors. And number three, we'd speak about ethical factors. Now, when we speak about the significance, importance of this particular topic, we have had questions on this pre 2021 quite a lot. In 2015, in May 2015, we had two questions in this. We had a question in variant one, and we also had a question in variant three on this from this very topic, right? However, after your syllabus has changed in 2021, the paper structure actually changed more. There have been questions on this. There have been, I believe, there have been three questions on this from this particular topic, and they've all been 8 marker questions. Nonetheless, since this topic is still a part of the syllabus, since this topic is still a part of the syllabus, even after the syllabus change, we cannot assume, we should not assume that we would not get a question on this. So there's always a possibility that we might end up getting a 26-mark question on this. So yeah, we'd discuss this topic first, and then we'd move on towards discussing the different questions that we've had on this earlier. So when we speak about the factors that affect a research process, to begin with, if we speak about practical factors, now what are practical factors? Practical factors, my dear, could include accessibility towards a subject, right? If you do not have access to the subject, to the group that you want to conduct a research on, it might not be possible for you to be able to gather data. Likewise, money could be a constraining factor too. At the same time, we could speak about time. If you do not have enough of time to be able to collect extensive amount of data, then you would eventually end up choosing methods that are quicker, right? The nature of the topic, and towards the end, we'd speak about research questions. So these are a couple of factors that we would be discussing under the heading of practical factors, or these are the factors that we usually refer to as practical factors. To begin with, when we speak about access to and availability of data, right? The access to and availability of data over here, it does not make sense to choose a research topic, if there's little chance of generating data about it. Of course, the this heading over here pretty much explains it all. If you do not have access to the group of individuals that you want to conduct a research on, if they're not available to you, your data collection might be a problem, right? So ease of access to people and research sites varies. Getting access to public places is relatively easier. We all know this. If you want to conduct a research at a shopping mall, it could be a cinema, it could be a club, any street, any museum, etc., etc. It would be relatively easier for you. However, in some cases, for instance, if I may say, if you want to conduct a research at any school, or if you want to conduct a research at any hospital, you'd have to seek permission from gatekeepers. Over here, my dear, it's pretty important that you understand what gatekeepers are, or what the term gatekeepers over here means or refers to. When we use the term gatekeeper, an individual, an authoritative individual in a particular organization through whom you seek permission, or who's an authoritative person who's actually there to give permission to you if you want to conduct a research on that particular institution, right? So, however, permission is needed from gatekeepers to research in sites such as schools, it could be hospitals, prisons, or jails. It can be difficult to gain access to and conduct research with groups such as criminal gangs. Now, this reminds me of the study that was conducted by Sudhir Venkatesh, right? The book that he wrote after his extensive research that took him about 7.5 years. The name of the book was Gang Leader for a Day. You might as well Google this. There are amazing YouTube videos on this as well. All you have to do is type Sudhir Venkatesh, or just type down Venkatesh Gang Leader for a Day. So if you are to conduct a research on a criminal gang, access to that particular group might not be easy for you, right? You can't just walk into them and ask them to fill out a questionnaire for you, which initially Venkatesh did. However, then he ended up conducting a research on them through observation. So similarly, gatekeepers are unlikely to allow access to a country's secret service organization. Now, there are limitations. It depends on what you want to study, on what group you want to conduct a research on what institution that you're trying to seek data on, right? So if it is a research, in a nutshell, if it's a research that could be conducted in a shopping mall, in a prison, I'm sorry, in a shopping mall, at a cinema, it would be easier for you to be able to have access to that place. However, nonetheless, if you are to conduct a research on a criminal gang, it might not be easy for you. If you want to conduct a research at a prison, of course, you have to get through the gatekeeper. Without the permission of the gatekeeper, you might not be allowed to gain data, right? And when I use the word gatekeeper for a prison, I am not really referring to the prison guard over here, right? Whoever is in an authoritative position at that particular prison, who who has the authority to allow anyone to visit that place, and might as well collect data from there too. So number one, the first factor that we spoke about over here was access to and availability of data, right? Let's take this ahead, move on and talk about the interest of the researcher. Now, remember, my dear, we discussing all of this under the heading of factors that affect a sociological research. Of course, when we talk about factors that affect a sociological research, like I had said earlier, we would initially speak about practical factors, right? So the interest of the research over here matters too. What if a sociologist is interested in a particular issue, in a particular phenomenon, in a particular institution, in a particular social group, right? If a sociologist is interested in a particular social group, the likelihood of him or her wanting to conduct a research on that particular topic would be more, right? As compared to a sociologist not being interested in a particular topic. So, of course, this reflects your values. This, as Weber, Maximilian Karl, Emil Weber, Max Weber, the social interaction is mentioned. Your topic of research, or when a researcher chooses a particular topic, it automatically reflects his or her values. So the interest of the researcher might lean towards a particular topic being studied, right? So researchers sometimes choose a research topic because it reflects their hobbies or their own personal interests. For example, they might like a particular type of music, such as rap, and examine whether it reflects the concerns of young African Americans. So the interest of the researcher ends up affecting the topic he or she decides to conduct a research on, right? So we've spoken about the first factor, that was accessibility to the group that you want to conduct a research on. Then the second factor over here is interest of the researcher, right? Moving on towards the third factor, that is funding. Money matters, right? So if we speak about funding here, sociological researches are costly, and for many instances, what happens is sociologists, they usually apply for funding from different organizations. And of course, when you talk about expecting funds from a particular organization, that particular organization's own priorities have to be taken into account. Let's just say there's this organization that is ready to fund a research, right? There are 10 researchers who have applied for a grant from that particular organization. The topic you've chosen, right? The topic as a researcher that you have in your mind, of course, has to be in line with the organization that is offering a fund, right? That is offering funding. If your topic of research, or if the topic that you've chosen as a researcher does not match with the priorities that are set by the organization, they might not fund you, and they might end up funding someone else. So in many instances, what happens is the topic that researchers conduct a research on are influenced by the funding organizations, right? If a researcher knows that a funding organization might be more inclined towards funding for a research on a particular topic, they might end up conducting a research on that particular topic then, right? So choosing a research topic is influenced by cost and funding issues. Most research undertaken by sociologists requires funding, of course. Research grants may be available from various sources, including charitable foundations. The government does that, and there are many business organizations that end up funding too, right? Each funding has its own priorities. Like I was saying, the government would have its own priorities when it comes to allocating or offering funds, right? Any charitable organization might have their own priority set. Any business might have their own priority set, right? For example, industrial organizations tend to fund projects dealing with their particular concerns, such as solutions to workplace stress. So if you talk about an industrial organization, for example, an industrial organization might be more inclined towards funding for a research that helps them find solutions to for the employees for to get rid of workplace stress, right? That's something of their concern. They'd be more inclined towards granting a fund if you as a researcher have chosen this as a particular topic, right? So the choice of topic is sometimes shaped by the priorities of the funding body. When making competitive applications, of course it's not you alone who wants to conduct a research and and has applied for a fund. There might be many other researchers too, right? So if it is competitive, if there are many people who have chosen or who are looking forward towards getting funded, of course, the person who or the research team whose ideas or whose research topic is in line with the organization that is expected to fund would have more chances of being funded as compared to the rest, right? So sociologists must take funding bodies' priorities into account if they are to be successful in being funded, right? So not only your choice of topic matters, at the same time, your choice of methods matter too, right? If you have I mean, of course, I'm sure you do have an idea about this. There are certain research methods that require more of money, that require more of funds as compared to the rest, right? So the research methods, if you you would choose a particular research method only when you know that your funds available, that the funds that you have available to you are enough for that particular research, right? If you think the funds that you have are lesser, you might alternatively opt for another research method through which you'd want to conduct your research. So financial considerations also influence choice of method. Research is expensive and the costs of traveling, stationery, transcribing interviews, and a lot more, right? Of course, if you want to conduct a research in another city, you'd have to make arrangements for the travel, for the stay, for the food, right? So, for example, must be covered. Some methods are more expensive than others. Some sociologists must choose methods that match their budget. So, when you're choosing your method of research, you need to make a point that your method of research matches with your budget, right? Questionnaires, my dear, are relatively cheaper. If you want to conduct a research through unstructured interviews, they would relatively cost you more. Alternatively, if you want to conduct a research through participant observation, that would cost you even more, right? So yeah, for example, if they were doing research into equality in the workplace, their budget might not cover lengthy unstructured interviews, but it might be enough for a group interview, right? We've studied this earlier when we're doing group interviews. Group interviews are they save you time and they save you money as well. There are a lot of people being questioned at the same time. So if you are getting hold of a lot of data from by gathering a lot of people together, that would definitely save you a lot of time, right? Now, taking this ahead, so where were we? Might not cover lengthy unstructured interviews, but it might be enough for a group interview or a self-completion questionnaire. Self-completion questionnaires are cheaper. They're relatively cheaper. Funding also affects the number of interviews that can be conducted. The number of interviewers also matters over here too, right? If you want to conduct some, let's say 30 interviews, and you know for a fact you want to conduct 30 interviews and you want to conduct them in another city, right? You would need more of interviewers. You'd have to hire more of interviewers. Or even if you want to do them all by yourself, you'd have to stay in that another city. That would again require you a lot of money. So again, funding is a factor that affects the funding is a practical factor. It's a practical factor that affects the a sociological research. Not only does funding affect the choice of topic, but funding also affects the what do we call this? Funding also affects uh, the method of research, the method that you're choosing to conduct your research, right? So we spoke about three different factors, my dear. Initially, we spoke about access to and availability of data, right? Number two, we spoke about interest of the researcher. Number three, we spoke about funding over here. After funding, the fourth factor that we'd be taking into account is time. A researcher needs to have ample amount of time if a researcher is short on time. Now, again, I'd like to refer to the study that was conducted by Venkatesh, right? Venkatesh spent 7.5 years with that criminal gang. Do you think I am pretty sure not many sociological research workers would show readiness towards spending or dedicating 7.5 years of their life on with a criminal gang just because they wanted to conduct a research. So your time matters. If you have less time, you might as well choose a method that is time saving, right? If you have a lot of time, and if you have enough of funds, and if you think, and if you have the interest to, and if you have access to that particular group, right? Now what I've done is I just mentioned all of these four factors together, right? So if you have all of them together, then you might as well want to conduct a research through the method of your choice, right? So some methods are more time consuming and labor intensive than others. For example, parchment observation sometimes takes more than a year. I just give you an example. A researcher's time is limited, and given this, they might decide to conduct interviews rather than a lengthy parchment observation study, right? So we just compared two different research methods over here, an interview with a parchment observation. And what we understood from here is parchment observation takes more time, interviews relatively take less time, questionnaires take even lesser amount of time, right? The next one, the next practical factor, the topic and research questions. The topic and research questions influence the choice of method. For example, researchers studying the experience of becoming a parent. Now, look at the topic, the experience of becoming a parent. Do you think you can gain an insight on this particular subject matter through mere uh, structured questionnaires? I don't think so. If you want to know details, if you want to work on the validity of if you want to work on the validity aspect, if you want a detailed and explicit amount of data on this, you would of course look forward towards using qualitative methods, right? The experience of becoming a parent for the first time is more likely to use qualitative methods such as unstructured interviews, right? So the topic you've chosen, the research questions that you've had, again, are a factor that affect the choice of your research, that affect the choice of method for your research, rather, in this context, right? So rather than standardized questionnaires to capture participants' subjective experiences and meaning. So, to be able to capture participants' subjective experiences and meaning, the researcher, like this says, might as well want to conduct the research through unstructured interviews and not through standardized questionnaires. Because, of course, the amount of data that you gain through standardized questionnaires, it's not. It's not detailed data, right? So if you want rich qualitative data to be gathered, this is probably a better option for you, unstructured interviews. Now, we spoke about five different factors over here. The sixth factor that comes under the heading of practical factor, that comes under the heading of practical factors that affect a research process, that is the people being studied. Now, you wouldn't want to, as a researcher, you wouldn't want to use a questionnaire if you are to collect data uh, from children, right? If there are children, I mean, children might not understand questions well. If they're younger children, they might not understand questions well. Again, if it is a questionnaire, you need to make a point that the people that you want to collect data from are literate, are learned enough to be able to read and comprehend the questions from the questionnaire, right? So the people being studied is another factor that plays an important role when it comes to sociological research being conducted. Some methods are less suitable than others for studying certain groups. For example, self-completion questionnaires are unsuitable for people with literacy problems or for younger children, like I was explaining. Asking teenage gang members to participate in interviews or complete questionnaires is unlikely to produce the required information. However, alternatively, what you could do as a researcher is you might as well join in their activities. You might gain their trust and then observe them so that the data you gather is based more on reality. You need to gain, I mean, you need to build a rapport with them. You need to gain their trust. You need to make sure that they are being themselves, and so that you have so that you have enough of amount of data, or so that you have the type of data that you were looking forward towards. So 6 factors that we've discussed so far. The next factor, again, another very important factor, is the characteristics of the researcher. The characteristics of the researcher. When we speak about the characteristics of the researcher, of course, the researcher's age matters, the researcher's gender matters, his or her ethnicity matters, the researcher's social class matters too. Now, these are certain factors. I mean, of course, if you're a female, you might you might be responded to in a different manner as if you're interviewing someone as compared to you being a male, right? Again, the characteristics, likewise, the ethnic origin of the researcher matters too, right? If you talk about a researcher from an Afro-Caribbean origin, the responses that he or she might receive would be different. There's a possibility that they might be different from the responses that a white researcher might receive. So is the case with social class. So the factors, another factor is the characteristic of the researcher, characteristics of the researcher, naming them. We have age, we have gender, we have ethnicity, we have social class. These factors again affect the responses you receive. Researchers have a number of characteristics such as the age, the gender, the ethnicity, and the social class, which must be considered when selecting methods. An older participant observer, for example, may find it more difficult to be accepted by members of a teenage gang than a younger researcher, right? If, of course, if I mean, if I want to conduct a research on A-level sociology students, and I want to conduct that research through participant observation, I am not a teenager and I'd be the odd one out there. So if I want to conduct a research on on A-level sociology students, I might as well get hold of someone who is younger, who could fit in well, so that the data we receive, so that the data that is gathered is more valid, so that there's the data that we're gathering is more accurate. So we just spoke about seven different practical factors that affect that could affect a sociological research. To begin, we initially spoke about access and availability of data. Number one. Number two, we spoke about interest of the researcher. Number three, my dear, we spoke about funding. Number four, we spoke about the amount of time a researcher has. Number five, we spoke about the topic and the research questions. Number six, we spoke about the people being studied. And number seven, we spoke about the characteristics of the researcher. So what I do is I just show you all a question that we've had on this, so that yeah, look at this question. We had this question in October, November 2022. It is an 8-mark question. This was variant A though, right? In Pakistan, you have variant, this is in Pakistan, you have variant 2. Pakistan falls into zone 4, right? Explain 2 factors, a typical 8-mark question. Explain 2 factors, 2 practical factors that may influence a sociologist's choice of topic, right? May influence a sociologist's choice of topic, right? Now, taking this ahead, this is indicative content. As I have explained you numerous times earlier, when we speak about an 8-mark question, there's a typical method that we use when answering an 8-mark question. The best way is you divide this into 2 different questions of 4 marks each, and then follow the criteria that we have over here. You get the first mark for identifying that point. You get the second point for explaining that point. You get the third point for relevant sociological material. Let me be very clear. Sociological material does not always refer to a sociologist's name, right? It could be anything, any sociological concept, any theory, any evidence, or any name, any reference, anything, right? And then you get the fourth mark for explaining how this material actually supports the question, right? An example of this could be, uh, let's read the question again. The question is, write down two factors, or rather say explain two factors. They're asking you to explain it, right? Explain two factors that may influence a sociologist's choice of research topic. So the point identified over here is time, right? So the time spent conducting a research method, this is identification. Some research methods take much longer to conduct than others, such as participant observation. This is when you explained that particular point that you've identified. An example of this could be James Patrick's Glasgow gang research. You could add this up. And the fourth point, that is linking this, the fourth mark or the fourth point, that is linking the sociological material that you provided with the question, right? The sociological material that you provide should always be linked to the question, right? Else you would not get this fourth mark. For you to be able to get this fourth mark, better be aware whatever sociological material that you're picking, you eventually link it back to the question, right? So the fourth point over here, for example, covert participant observation may require a long time to get in, then the observation is likely to be time consuming. So this is what you do to be able to gain 4 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what I just spoke about. Second mark, third mark, and the fourth mark. This is for the first factor, right? And you repeat the same for the second factor. I could show you an answer being written on this as well. Just have a look. One practical factor that may be the resources available to the researcher. So the point over here is the resources available to the researcher. This includes money, money, time, etc. If a sociologist does not have the resources available to research a particular topic, then they naturally would not choose the topic for study, right? So in the marking scheme, time was seen as a separate factor. Over here, this resources available to the researcher. This is the point that has been identified over here, right? Now, the topic of marriage rates countrywide is very broad, for example, and something like this would not be used when the sociologist didn't have the money to collect data on it. Instead, a more specific topics such as marriage rates in one city might be chosen. So of course the resources that are available for you matters, right? So if you need to divide each paragraph, do you see how this is divided into two different paragraphs? And I would always advise you guys to use a block paragraph. A block paragraph is when you leave a line in between, right? Write down a paragraph, leave a line, move on to the next one. So the second point, another practical factor may be the access to the sample group. Accessibility, right? This is what we just spoke about. Some groups of people are very tight knit and refuse access to outsiders. This means the sociologist would be able to conduct a study on those people and would hence choose a different, more accessible sample group and topic. So the second point, the explanation of what the point you had identified. An example of this is a person wanting to study a deviant group such as gangs, which would not allow researchers to get involved. Practically speaking, a researcher would not be able to choose them for a topic and would instead have to go with a group that wouldn't be hostile or closed off. Divide your paragraphs into four different points. Always remember the criteria, right? Keep the criteria in your mind when or while answering a particular question. This would help you gain marks easily and this would save you time. So better planned answers always help you score better too, score more too. Now, we were discussing different factors. We're discussing different factors that affect the we're discussing different factors that affect the sociological research. We started off with practical factors, and now we move on towards ethical factors. Ethical factors, again, play a very important role when it comes to sociological research. There are many professional bodies. There are certain funding organizations too. They have their own well set ethical guidelines that are expected to be followed by researchers while conducting research, right? those guidelines very explicitly allow certain things or certain ways through which data could be collected, and researchers being advised to refrain from others. So today, professional bodies and funding bodies have ethical guidelines that cover the right and wrong ways to conduct research. For example, people should be made aware. We're talking about taking consent, taking informed consent. So the people you want to conduct a research on should know the nature of the research, the process of the research, and the purpose of your research, right? So, taking informed consent is one of the ethical guidelines that researchers are typically expected to follow while conducting a research. At the same time, researchers should make sure, they should make a point that they have ensured the protection of the participants. Now, when we use the word protection over here, protection from physical as well as psychological harm. So, yeah, to be able to decide whether they take part and be protected from physical and psychological harm. These guidelines apply to all stages of the research process, including the choice of topic and methods and the conduct of the research. They also relate to any publications arising from the research. Now, this over here, we're talking about confidentiality. Confidentiality. Now, do you know what? When a researcher is conducting a research, or when a research is being conducted, the findings of the research might not be very favorable for the research subject or for the participants, right? Or the findings of the research might be as such that the respondents or the participants or the subjects of your research might not want to what they might not want to associate themselves with that particular research. In that case, the best thing to do is anonymity, right? Now, while you are conducting a research, make sure that the identity of the subjects is kept hidden. The identity of the participants or the subjects is kept hidden. This is also referred to as confidentiality, right? So the people on whom you're conducting a research on, where did it go? Yeah. So before you publish your work, make sure you discard any sort of information that could help any reader trace back the people who were actually participating in this research. For instance, like I had mentioned earlier, if I want to conduct a research on AS sociology students, I could just say AS sociology students from a particular city. Let's just say Karachi, Pakistan, that appeared for the paper in May 2024. Now, how do you think anyone would be able to trace who these participants were, right? So in practice, ethical issues may arise during the course of the fieldwork, and the sociologist must be prepared to deal with them, right? So, uh, the ethical guidelines very explicitly clarify that consent should be taken and participants not being deceived. Nonetheless, there are many situations when you actually getting to work. Many sociologists, in their defense, what they say is if they tell participants that they'd be conducting a research on them, that would lead to Hawthorne effect. Now, what is Hawthorne effect? Hawthorne effect, to put it in a simplistic manner, when participants end up changing their behavior, when they end up changing the way they naturally are, just because of the fact that they know that they're being studied. Knowing that you're a part of a research might end up in you altering your behavior, you're not being natural. So yeah, in practice, ethical issues may arise. So if a participant, if a researcher does not take consent, what does he or she do? If you're not taking consent, then you debrief the participants. After the research is over, after you're done collecting your data, you might you're expected to apologize from the participants, right? You apologize from them. You tell them that you uh, were conducting a research on them, you were collecting data from them. Make sure you're very clear about them knowing the nature, the purpose of the study, and then make sure that they're leaving the research premises or the premises where you were collecting the data in in a stable state. Make sure they're not being traumatized or psychologically harmed or distressed. And then, despite of you apologizing, despite of you making them aware of the true nature, the purpose of the research. If they're still adamant on their data being discarded, you're advised to do that. I mean, just because you've collected data, that doesn't mean you would publish data without the participants' permission, right? Even if you've collected data, you are expected to let go of it. You're expected to discard it if the participant chooses so, or if the participant does not allow you to use that data. Do not pressurize the participant. So we were talking about different factors that affect sociological research. Initially, we spoke about practical factors, and number two, we spoke about ethical factors. Now, I'd want you all to read a bit more of content when it comes to ethical factors. So, yeah, according to Pimple in 2002, sociological research is generally bound by a code of ethical practice that involves researchers using their values to guide them in answering three research questions. Number one, is it true? At its more extreme, unethical behavior here involves things like the researcher deliberately making up or fabricating data or falsifying the results. So whatever the data is that you're publishing, whatever the findings are that are being published, make sure they are true, they're not fabricated, right? Number two, is it fair? Unethical behavior here covers how others in the research process are treated and referred to things such as ownership or plagiarism. For example, who can ethically claim to be the author of something, or plagiarism, passing off the work of others? I'm sure you know, you're aware of them both. Number three, is it wise? This refers to a wider question about whether research can be morally justified and whether a different research topic or method would have greater moral justifications. This Pimple argues involves, does the research improve the human condition or damage it? Does it lead to a better or worse world? Or to would it be better to purpose other lines of research? So once you're done collecting your data, make sure that you publish your work only when you think this would improve human conditions, right? This would help individuals in society, help the society. Be pretty cautious, be wary, make sure that your work is leading the society, the world to be a better place. Would it be better to purpose other lines of research? I mean, do you want to do some additional work along with this? Now, taking this ahead, there are a couple of references that could possibly be used as well. The study by Roy Wallace. I mean, you'd study this when doing A2 religion. For now, you could use it as a reference if you feel like. The study by David Rosenhen. This was an amazing research by Dr. David Rosenhen. He wanted to figure out, he wanted to figure out if psychiatrists or mental hospitals, they were capable enough of distinguishing or figuring out the sane from the insane, right? The hypothesis he had, or what he suspected, was that doctors could not accurately diagnose schizophrenia, that is a mental illness, and send students displaying fake symptoms into hospitals to test his hypothesis. So number three, this study by Milgram. This is very popular. If you're a psychology student, you'd know this. These are just references that you guys could use, and these two are more popular when it comes to psychology, the last two. However, this one by Roy Wallace, this was on uh, the Church of Scientology. Some of you might know about this. Others, this is amazing and very interesting. But then again, it would take a lot of time for me to be able to explain this to you. We studied this in detail in A2 Sociology, Religion. Now, these are a couple of references that could also be used. So, my dear, we spoke about two different factors that could affect a research process. Number one, we spoke about practical factors. Number two, we spoke about ethical factors. And the third in line over here is theoretical factors, right? Now, when we talk about the theoretical factors that affect a sociological research, Of course, if you're a positivist, you'd be more inclined towards using quantitative research methods. If you're an interpretivist, you'd be more inclined towards using qualitative research methods. Now, just keep this in mind and let's move on. A sociologist's theoretical position can influence the choice of research topic. A sociologist's theoretical position, right, can influence the choice of research topic. Every theoretical position sees certain aspects of society as particularly important. For instance, if we speak about Marxism over here in particular, Marxism would be, or Marxists are more inclined towards inequality. Being more specific, they're more inclined towards social class inequality, right? If you're a feminist, likewise, they'd be more inclined towards conducting their researches that could help them get over with patriarchy, right? Now, for example, Marxism sees the class system as the foundation of capitalist society. As a result, consequently, Marxists tend to focus on topics such as class inequality, class conflict, or class identity, right? So, you, as a sociologist, your theoretical position is affecting your choice of research topic. Then we spoke about an example over here. If you're a Marxist, you'd be more interested in this, and this, etc., right? Taking this ahead, for feminist sociologists, they tend to focus more on gender issues, in particular, gender inequality. Some feminists prefer a qualitative approach to research because, for example, unstructured interviews can reduce the power relationships between researcher and the participants. We had spoken about Maria Mayer and we had spoken about Anne Oakley, right? Feminist sociologists, they're more inclined towards using unstructured interviews. They think through unstructured interviews, they could help the participant, the respondent, typically a female in this case, speak whatever they want to speak about with the freedom, with the liberty, which usually structured interviews do not offer, right? I'm talking about a comparison between structured interviews and unstructured interviews. Unstructured interviews, they give they give the respondent the freedom, the liberty, right? However, structured interviews, they're more rigid, they're more fixed, right? So your theoretical position, you as a sociologist, your theoretical position affects your topic of research, affects the method of research that you'd want to pick. Taking this ahead, theoretical issues also concern questions about validity, reliability, and generalizability. Now, the general understanding held is that quantitative methods are expected to be more reliable. Quantitative methods help you better with generalizability of the findings. For instance, we might as well speak about the usage of a questionnaire, right? Questionnaires, if they're fixed questionnaires, they would be the chances of there being higher reliability is always there. The chances of the findings being more generalizable is always there, right? On the other hand, if we speak about interpretive sociologists, they're more inclined towards using qualitative research methods, right? And qualitative research methods such as, we could say, unstructured interviews, or we could say participant observation, they are assumed to be higher in terms of validity, right? Theoretical issues also concern questions about validity, reliability, generalizability of the data gathered during research. For example, studies of gangs are usually based on participant observation. This allows the researcher to build a strong rapport with the participants and gather rich, detailed data. So, participant observation would help you gather rich, detailed data. However, if gang members do not trust the participant observer or question their motives, for instance, this may reduce the data's validity. Now, even I'm referring to Venkatesh study for the third time in a row. Venkatesh study, the gatekeeper over there, the gang leader JT, was the person who helped Venkatesh have access to that group, and the amount of time that he spent there helped him build a rapport with the gang members. But at the same time, if you think there were some of the group members who did not trust the motive, of Venkatesh, they might not have been helpful towards him, right? So, positivism and interpretivism. Positivists, like we all know, they support the idea of using quantitative data, and interpretivists, my dear, they are more inclined towards qualitative data, right? So, according to some sociologists, positivist and interpretivist approaches are a key influence on the choice of data and the selection of methods. Increasingly, however, sociologists mix quantitative and qualitative methods. We are talking about triangulation over here, triangulation, or we are talking about methodological pluralism. So, increasingly, however, sociologists mix quantitative and qualitative methods within one project. The choice of methods in mixed methods approaches is likely to be determined by the research questions and practical factors rather than by issues related to positivism or interpretivism. Let me assume we're all aware of methodological pluralism and methodological purism. Methodological pluralism versus methodological purism, they're extremes, right? Methodologically purist, if you're a positivist, you'd be adamant that you'd want to use quantitative data only. If you're an interpretivist, so would be the case. However, when we use the term methodological pluralism has to do with multiple methods, right? Multiple methods being used together. So the idea of using more than one method is referred to as methodological pluralism. However, when we use the term triangulation, when you put this, see, this is more like this is a theory, and this is when you're putting that theory or that concept into practice when you're actually using, right? Triangulation is when you're actually using more than one method. This helps you overcome the weaknesses in one method by the strengths of another method, right? This, of course, adds to the validity of the research. So yeah, this particular topic, I uh, think this has been a popular topic when it comes to questions. Uh, when it comes to 8 marker questions, we have this another 8 mark question over here that says that we had in February and March 2022. It's an 8 mark question that says explain 2 ways the research might be affected by how it is funded. Again, the same method of uh, attempting an 8 mark question. This is how it is. And here you go. Now, the question is explain 2 ways that research might be affected by how it is funded. Explain 2 ways that research might be affected by how it is funded. Money available will influence which methods can be used. Some research methods are more expensive than others. For example, cohort participant observation. See, this has been seen as a sociological material over here, right? Do you see any name over here? No, you don't. And it is totally okay, right? Now, linking this third point with the initial point or the with the question would help you get the fourth mark or get the fourth mark. For example, cohort participant observation may take longer as you have to gain the trust of the group, and so you may only be able to use this method if you have a large funding source. Now, these have been the 8 markers that we have had. If we take this ahead, these were the two 26 mark questions. I mean, pre 2021, we used to have 25 mark questions. We could just rephrase these questions. So if you get this question today, it would be something like this. It would be like evaluate the view that, that, what is happening? Oh. So evaluate the view that practical factors are more important than theoretical factors in influencing the choice of research method. We might as well just get rid of this part. So, a 26 mark question. Again, another question that you've had on the same topic. Explain and assess the view that the most important influence on a sociologist's choice of research method is the theoretical perspectives. Or this could be something like this. Evaluate evaluate the view that So something like this. Evaluate the view that the most important influence on a sociologist's choice of research method is their theoretical perspective. A typical 26 mark question. Now, I hope whatever we have discussed today has been helpful. You might as well read through this part so that you have some added information that you could possibly add up to your 26 mark questions. And yeah, take good care of yourselves. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble. Spread positivity, spread smiles, and Allah Hafiz.